Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our third webinar in our Designer's Business Guide webinar series. This one is called Fast Cash, Opportunities Hiding in Plain Sight. As Sherra said, my name is Katie. I am the Vice President of AIJ Atlanta. Just a quick reminder, this webinar is being recorded. So if you want to watch it back later or send it along to folks who've missed it, you'll be able to do that. We will be answering questions at the end of the webinar in a Q&A session, but like Sherra said, we're going to keep it kind of involved in the chat box. You are muted, so I know it's lunchtime, so if you have lunch, feel free to chew and munch, and you won't be disturbing anybody. All communication from our participants will be in the chat box. So many of you may know Sherra. This is her second webinar in the series, but Sherra has been a business consultant, creative recruiter, and career coach to designers for over 2 decades. She reluctantly became an entrepreneur out of necessity in 2001, which is just a show of her resilience and how she turns challenges into opportunities. She is a former AIJ Atlanta president and is currently our education chair. So I have a lot to learn from her experience, and we are so lucky to have her. So Sherra, with that, I will throw it back over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Miss Katie. I'm gonna go off of this page for a second back. Oh, well, I gotta get my right screen, sorry. There's 1,000 boxes open on my window right now. Oh, hey, Renee. Okay, so you're in the right place if this is what you signed up for. If you're doing any social media and you want to share any of this, here are the handles. So please use those. Grab a screen capture. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly, but so for this one, I'm using the hashtag FastCash. My hashtag generally is a creatives who prosper, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. I did this, if you're just jumping on and you weren't here when I said it before, just if you can find yourself on this graph and put in the chat who you are and what stage of growth you're in, I would appreciate that. I find it's really helpful to know who I'm talking to when I'm talking to a green dot. So these webinars are always a little bit interesting to me because I'd much prefer sitting in a room with all of you and being in person and getting to interact that way. So chat box it is. All right, so I like to start with just a baseline of, I told you I use the hashtag creatives who prosper. So I like to start with a baseline of how I think about money. And certainly as a business person, we all have to be tuned into profit and all the things that are involved in profit. And I like this little graph, but what I really have come to really think about, and as I talk to my creatives especially, I find most of you aren't necessarily, well, you certainly like to have money. You're not necessarily driven by profit. The work also has to have some purpose, and the work has to be good, and so really looking at it more from what are opportunities that maximize your time, make you the most money, and allow you to use your creativity in the best way possible. And for many of you, that's a very purpose-driven kind of use of talent as well. And that's always sort of my favorite kind of client to work with. So when I talk about profit, I'm always talking about prosperity from that standpoint of that I want you making as much money as you can from your talents with as little time as possible. So that's our baseline for what we're going to talk about today. And and along those lines, and this is a little bit of review if you were on the last one, I'm just going to run through it really quick, but just so everybody's on the same baseline. The idea of rate versus price is something that I work with my clients a lot on, and that we get out of talking about rate. You may know what your hourly rate is in terms of profitability, but it's not something that we ever talk about with clients. And so we really talk more, because rate ends up being equated to cost, whereas the price you can have a conversation around ROI and investment. So that's where we like to live. And I like you to think about what is your, what X of an ROI based on the money a client spends with you, based on the return they should be getting back from the work that you do for them. And I like my baseline with my clients is, if you don't get 10X off of an investment with me, I feel like I haven't done my job. And so for everybody, you need, like, what is that 10X number for you? Or what is that X number for you? And then this is, again, a little bit of review from last time, talking about, I like my clients thinking about ideal projects, ideal price, and ideal prospects. And that's going to feed into what we're doing in just a few minutes around how we're going to go look for some new opportunities. But an ideal project is interesting, deliverable, like you're actually going to be able to complete it. They're not going to drag it out and not ever use it, so that you have examples of it. It's you have the chance to do excellent work, not just another job for another paycheck. It's attributable in that they haven't locked you up in an NDA and you can't tell anybody you ever did this work. And then it leads to more, ideally, and that you can upsell them continuously and develop a long-term relationship. The ideal price is that you're able to justify it as an investment for them, and in that way that it's defensible, that it's expensive. People should always cringe a little when you give them a number, because that means that you've hit the top of their range, not that you've left a bunch of money on the table. But it should still be affordable, and you should know enough about how much money they are, how much they can really afford even in a stretch, and that where they would go get more money if they don't have the money in the particular bucket they're talking about. And then lucrative, in that you should never be pricing just to break even. And I see that a lot with some of my creatives, is that there's a sort of pricing on what it costs you to do the work rather than what you should be making as a profit. And that's where a lot of the creatives that I work with really struggle with ever sustaining a business, or feeling like they're really getting ahead in the work that they do. And then the prospects, we want to be intentional about who your prospects are. And that's a lot of what we're going to spend time on today. They're discoverable in that we can find contact information about them. They are experienced buying from someone like you. You're not having to train them. And that's where a lot of folks are working with startups, and you're having to train them on how to work with a designer. We really want to move to that next level of opportunity where the client has already worked with a designer, already understands the process, and you might have to untrain them on something, but you don't have to train them on something. That they're appreciative, and that they are people that you enjoy working with, and that they're loyal. And again, back to that, it leads to more. You're going to be able to upsell it. So those are all our baselines as we start to talk next about going to look for work fast. And then what are you selling is the next important thing. And I've got 3 slides on here to try to cover whoever might show up for this call. Ideally, if you're in business and own a business and you're selling your business, you're looking for project work, whether that's as a freelancer or as a firm. And this idea that you have an ideal project that's short in duration, that can be implemented with as few resources as possible. If you're a solopreneur, it's something you can execute completely and totally on your own. If you're a business, then it's executing with the smallest amount of team possible, so that it's as profitable as possible. And then above that is the ongoing work. Could you sell them into a year-long engagement, or a series of work, or some kind of retainer type thing? A downsell would be either a smaller project just to get your foot in the door and to get in their system from a payments perspective, or it could be, and I'm working with some of my clients on this right now, it could be a discovery session that is the prelude to the ideal project that you might normally have sold within the project, but you sell it out as a smaller piece to start with, because they don't have enough information yet to be able to scope the project for you to be able to price the project with certainty, to know that you're not going to end upside down, or that you're not going to overprice and lose the opportunity because you thought the project was bigger than they thought it was. And then the bottom piece is just, how do you nurture people that don't buy from you when you first reach out to them? And so what is your follow-up strategy? What kind of resources can you send to your ideal customer that keeps them engaged and are relevant to them? And it translates, again, in a similar way, if you are working still hourly as a contractor, subcontractor for somebody, that certainly if you're working through a staffing agency, there's an hourly rate. But if you are working 1099 for somebody, the option, if you can't do project work, to then do a regular rate at a monthly engagement, a higher rate for a smaller project, smaller engagement, and then a lower price the longer they'll engage you, and especially if they'll pay you up front. That's a big piece of, I always try to train my clients that if they're going to give bulks of hours, those bulks of hours are cheaper if those bulks of hours are paid for in advance, so that you're not having to then spend money spend time and effort chasing down money after you've done the work. And then my clients sometimes will have a design rate and a production rate. And that's the first thing we get rid of, because a production rate is just you saying you're willing to compromise to be cheaper. So unless you have somebody that you're outsourcing to, that you're clear with them that this is not you doing the work, they are not getting you for that price, don't do a production rate. That's just my 10 cents. And then for those that are salary, you always have your sort of ideal desired salary. The upsell is, can you get them to pay commissions on bringing in business and ways that you add extra value? Downsell would be, if they can't hit your desired salary, then what else can you negotiate? So is that time off? Is that education? Is that conferences? Is that flex hours? Is that work from home? Whatever that looks like for you, knowing that you have those kinds of trade-offs that also have value in that exchange of time and money and talent. So, and then contract to hire is obviously, just be careful that you don't get in a situation where you're so cheap to have on contract, they'll never hire you full-time if your goal is to be hired contract, or be so expensive on contract that they never hire you full-time if you don't want to go full-time. So a little bit of my recruiter background in there. So now to the nuts and bolts of what we're going to do today. So can y'all type in the chat box and just give me some love, so I know you're still there, that you're ready to make some fast cash? Come on. Yay. Okay. So this is a process I teach at the beginning of every engagement with a client. So you can do this with any social media. I am doing this particularly with LinkedIn because that's usually where we start, and that's where you keep most of your business engagements. But I have a brand new client that is doing most of her work on Instagram. And so what she's doing then is looking at who she's following and who her followers are. Show you the money. Yes, Sam Teague, show you the money. The idea that within your contacts in LinkedIn or in whatever social media platform you're using primarily, there is a list of people who already know you, already know about you, that you may have even forgotten are in that list. Or that if you're not looking at them through the correct lens, you're not thinking about where the opportunities are. So I start most of the time with LinkedIn, and if you don't know how to download your LinkedIn, this is the first step. So you go up to your, I think I have if I'm going down here and pick, I think I have a pointer. If you go up here to your, oops, I hope I'm not moving something, up to this, this isn't working, up to this, and do the drop down, and then go to settings and privacy. And then we're going to go here, and you scroll down on that page for privacy, and there's a get a copy of your data. And you click on I want something in particular, and you click connections so you don't get a big giant spreadsheet of stuff you can't use. You request the archive, and then it'll be ready in about 10 minutes. And that'll give you your list of LinkedIn contacts in a CSV, Excel, Google Sheets, whatever you use for spreadsheets. And I know most designers don't really like spreadsheets, but I'm telling you, this is a really good reason to start to love them. So everybody got this? And it's okay. Pamela says most of my contacts are designers, and we'll get to that. And it's true. A lot of you are going to have your, a lot of your contacts are going to be heavily weighted. We're not looking for hundreds of contacts. We really are looking for 10 or 20 people that you've, well, yes, John Harwell loves spreadsheets and numbers. Anyway, so you get it here. And then what you end up with is something that looks like this. And I took out all the names of mine. I left the positions, but it shows you their first name, their last name, their email address, their company name, their position, and when you connect it to them. This is how it comes in the CSV file. LinkedIn used to give you their email addresses if they were in there. And with all the GDPR, they stopped doing that. So occasionally you'll see an email address in there if someone has very intentionally made their email address available to you in this kind of download. If they did not, that information is still, oh, and I didn't do a screen capture of that. I'll pull up LinkedIn and show you. But in LinkedIn, you can still go under their contact information and manually get it. So that field needs to stay there, but it's typically, for most of you, when you download it, going to be disappointingly blank. I luckily downloaded my list right before the GDPR stuff went in, and have, for all of my old contacts, had it, but do not. But it's just so you can't spam people, and you're probably glad it's gone. For you, not for you as a salesperson, but for you. And this is what I do to the spreadsheet once I download it with my clients, is we add a place for their LinkedIn URL, a place for their phone number. I like to add a place for their state location in case you're within your niche, you're dealing with people that are outside of the area. If you really only want to work with people in Atlanta and want to, you want to narrow that down to cities and states, then you can do that as well. But for the most part, state is good enough. And then I've got so many little open screens. I think it's the next slide. Oops. Oh, and so then as a final one, I add this column A to the left of the names. And that is going to be the column that, as you scan through, you're just asking yourself back to the projects and the ideal criteria and the ideal, whatever your ideal project is that you end up defining for yourself, or projects, things that you really love to do, things that you really want to do again, or companies that you really like working for. You can go through here and you can sort by company, or you can sort by position. You can sort by whatever. You can sort by connect on date and go. It automatically downloads with your most recent connections first. And so I like to leave it like that for the first pass, and you run through sort of most recent to longest to go, but then go back and sort and play with company and with titles. And what you'll end up finding is that people have moved to places you didn't know they were, or that there are other, like, that there's just people you've forgotten that are even on your list, especially when you get to a pretty substantial LinkedIn list. And so in doing that, I have never worked with a client that we weren't able to go through their list and find anywhere from 5 to 50 potential connections of people that would fit into that sort of ideal client pattern of people they should talk to. And then the next step really becomes you're just reviewing it and analyzing, and the questions you're asking yourself. Once you've looked at who's there, then you start thinking about, there's tons of people all of us have on LinkedIn, or that we know that we don't end up having on LinkedIn. And so that's the first place to start is like, okay, based on who else here, who comes to mind that's missing that I really already know and should be on this list. And then you go back to LinkedIn and you connect with them, and you add them to the list. But the other way to look at it is, once you've gone through the list and identified people that you could potentially be talking to, who then is similar to them. And that's when you can really start doing your LinkedIn and building out your ideal company prospect list. You start to figure out, like, what are their titles, and what you can go into their profiles and start to look for keywords you can use to search LinkedIn or search Google. There's a lot of, if you don't have a premium LinkedIn, which I don't know if you noticed that when I show my LinkedIn, but I, as a recruiter, the only times I've ever had premium LinkedIn subscriptions were when a company I worked for was paying for them, or that they offered me a free 30 days or something. And I was like, sure. But I've always been able, because of what I learned just from recruiting, just on how to find contact information for people, I've never had to pay LinkedIn to give me that information. It's just, most of it's readily available on the internet. And if you can't do anything else, you can connect with them and then message them. LinkedIn has suddenly started making it harder to connect with people that are third degrees if you're not. They've finally gotten wise to my ways, I think. But there's still always workarounds in terms of connecting with people that mean you don't have to be paying the expensive. LinkedIn will never be my sponsor, because I will never advocate for you to pay the hundreds and hundreds of dollars it takes to maintain a premium subscription in LinkedIn. So but anyway, so you're thinking about who's similar and you're doing research on who else that might be. And there's all kinds of great, once you start searching and start building your list, it just snowballs. There's a lot of rabbit holes to go down, and it starts to snowball in terms of, I hope Angela doesn't mind me sharing this, but one of my clients, I was doing some research for her, and I ended up, like, I was searching for a particular contact's information, and I ended up on a website at Harvard that she just told me I could totally share, that that was like this whole directory of her ideal clients that were advisors to this particular program at Harvard. And the list was a little dated, but it had everything. It had phone numbers and emails, and made it like, I was like, here's a gift. Here's a bunch of names. You can go try to find these people. And so when you start doing the search for somebody similar, using the titles, using the information you find out about the people you do know, it opens up so much more information for you that's just like hanging out there on the web waiting for you to find it. Angela also is really good at searching, and she'd only given me 5 names to find, but I think within an hour I had found phone numbers for all 5 people, because it's just, that information is there. You just have to know how to poke around at it and find it. So the action steps for you once you've built this beginning list is that you're adding contact information. And then once you've got contact information, this is where most of my designers sort of like to hold back a little bit. They'd rather email and communicate and then complain nobody's responding. But what we're emailing and asking, we're not emailing them and telling them your life story and why you're perfect for them. We're emailing them with just a little hint of why they should get on a call with you, and then a very direct request for a 15 to 20 minute phone call where you can start to build a relationship. And if you aren't familiar with sales process and sales concepts, the length of time it takes to get to know, you can just think about it interpersonally, or if you've ever dated through apps on dating apps, or dated through mobile apps, that the time it takes to get to know somebody in an email versus a quick phone call, like you just leapfrogged at that point with a quick phone call to now there's a little more of a relationship, and ideally there's enough of a connection to then warrant something else. And it's been really fun in this process with with all of my clients, but some of my most recent ones have had incredible results. And so John Hartwell has the record right now of fastest response time, and he sent an email to a prospect one day and got a 3-minute response to the email we had crafted. And that's part of where the boom came from. But yes, booyah. But this idea of like, people will respond. Angela had one the other day that responded to her that was too busy to talk, send me your information. And so we crafted the response back to that with the right samples. And suddenly the woman was asking for a rate sheet. And then we crafted a response to a request for a rate sheet about why things would need to be quoted on a more consultative basis. And she was like, great, I'll let you know the next time I have a project. And so it's, you can advance a relationship really fast once you decide to be really clear with them about how you're communicating. And then the goal is really to have those sales conversations with, as many people as possible, as soon as possible, right? So you're asking for calls within a week or within a few days, so that, and you're giving them a very specific time that you're blocking off in your calendar that is, they'll either call you or you'll try to call them if you have their phone number. And the really fun part too is when they respond to an email, even if they respond to an email with too busy, they usually forget to take their signature out. And so now you have all their contact information if you didn't have their phone number before then. So if you can get any kind of response out of them, even if it's a no, it's still usually a win, because there's still usually a little bit more information that you're adding to what you know about them based off of that. Sometimes they'll tell you, I'm not the person you need to talk to, you need to talk to so-and-so. Then you know that, that's not something you need to waste your time on anymore. And so, or maybe they have influence over it. No, John, I'm good. Thank you. John was asking me if I needed him to say anything. Um, the so yeah, so that's really the whole goal of all of this, is just to get people on the phone and have conversations as fast as humanly possible. Got a tickle in my throat, y'all. And then it's just rinse and repeat. And I recommend that you download your list quarterly. And I mean, obviously, you're going to start to put it in a database if you don't already have one, some kind of CRM system. But at least download it quarterly to get who's come in new off of the top, so that you're aware of who it is you're connecting with. So, but it's really, if you do this quarterly and remind yourself of who's in your database, and you can do this even if you have a database. Sometimes the CRM databases are clunky to look at in list view. And if they are, then just export to a CSV in that, and give yourself that ability to scan everybody in a quick search, rather than trying to go one by one through your CRM system, if you have one of those. But it gives you a way to, obviously people who already know you are going to be the fastest sell. And then the people that know them are the next fastest sell. And so we want to be able to, when we start to look for adding people into who your contacts are, or who you're going to reach out to, we start to prioritize really around who's most ideal in terms of the kind of projects, obviously the first priority. Then who do you know the best? Who would take your phone call? Who would answer a text message from you? I know one of my clients, there were some of the people we were going to, they were college friends, but now they're working at a place that that would be an ideal client for him. They're just not in the right position. So they're people he's able to text and get on a phone call with and ask questions. Or like, he found that one of his contacts had moved to another company that I knew for other reasons had gone through some changes, and he was able to get on the phone with her and get put into their, like, he's now in their vendor management system and getting projects, because he already had a client relationship with her, but she just moved somewhere new, and now he was able to step right into new work with a new client. But you want to be able to, again, prioritization is, are they ideal? Are they, do you have contact information and access to them? And then next would be, does somebody you know really well have access to them that you could leverage that on? And when you start to do that, again, I've never done this process with somebody that I didn't find anywhere from 5 to 50 potential leads that give us something to start working off of and building that ideal client list. And almost every time I've done it, it's led to some kind of work. And back to that 10 times that I said, like, my goal always is, whatever somebody spends with me to do that process, that there's going to be a return on that pretty quickly, that we're able to go and find that amount of work as soon as possible. So yeah. So if you wanted some help, and then we'll get to Q&A, I'm just going to run through a few things about me and how I can help you if you want. I am starting a new group. It's going to officially start on July 6th. It's a 4-module group training. It's 6 group mentoring sessions. And then you get 2 individual, one at the beginning, one at the end, strategy sessions that equal about 40 minutes or 90 minutes of coaching. It's all done in group work. So my goal is to only have 12 people, and to try to make sure that there's no more than about 75 to 80% overlap. Less than that, hopefully ideal, in terms of ideal clients, right? So that you're not at risk of asking questions and exposing anything that would, with a competitor, right? Like on some level, all designers are competitors. I took the niche slides out of here that I talked about last time, but my goal with working with anybody I work with is try to get you down to a narrow niche where you are, you're not competing with every other designer in town, that you know that your ideal client is so intentional and specialized that the chances of 1 in 12 people in a group with you would not be very large, that you would be competing for the same customers. And so just if you're interested in that, and we can have a conversation about it, but it's $2,500 pay in full or $675 a week for 4 weeks. The process is 6 weeks long, but it's 4 weeks of training and then some support as you're hopefully making. There's bonuses to if you join today or tomorrow. I'm doing a mentoring session on Wednesday at noon. That is, you can download your list and we can start finding you people to call immediately. And I can help you go through that and help you fill in some of the gaps. If you register for Friday, I'm doing a hyper accelerator next week, Monday through Thursday. That is basically the whole thing, but done 4 days in a row instead of 4 weeks in a row. And then you can do it again for the 4 weeks for a refresher if you want and still participate in all the group calls. But it's just for the people that go ahead and jump on board quickly, then I will get started quickly. And then if you do a pay in full today, I'll add another hour of individual coaching or research. You can put me on finding contact information for you. And then I'm doing prizes. So and I know the reason to register sooner rather than later is I'm paying $100 to the first person to recover their investment of the $2,500. And then I'm paying, or whatever the $675 adds up to, it's a little bit more. And then $50 Amazon gift cards to anyone who recovers their investment before the end. So you actually could make money on this process over the next 30 days if you wanted to do that. And then if you're interested, if you'd rather have individual support, you can, I didn't tell you how to register for that. Just, you can email me if you're interested in doing the group, sb@sherrabell.com. Or if you are interested in doing individual, then I'm happy to jump on a 20-minute phone call with you to go over that. So you can get the slides today at bit.ly SBC AIGA. And there's a checklist. And then there's also an option to get the slides and the checklist from the last one if you didn't get those and you want those. So, and then that's Q&A. So anybody got questions? I made it in 12 minutes and 36, or 12 hours, an hour in 36 minutes. It's just 12:36. So anything you want me to go back to? Any questions you have? While I wait, I'll talk about the way this applies to job search. And I will go back up to the job search slide. The way it's going to apply to job search is really the same thing. You're looking for companies that you want to work for, and you're looking for people with titles that you would want to work for, and you're using that to help you go out and find more people like them. And I've taught job search to students for years, and I used to make them in class assignments find 200 ideal companies that 200 companies they thought they might want to work for, and then you narrow that down to 50 that you think you ideally would like to work for, and then you get it down to a top 20 that you're willing to put some time in doing some in-depth research, and then you're ranking them. And for practices, you can start at 10 or you can start at 20, but you're practicing the calls from the least ideal of those 10 that are still ideal to the most ideal, so that you practice on the ones that are a little less ideal, because there's a little bit of fumbling sometimes in your sales conversations to figure out what exactly to say, how exactly to position so that people are saying yes, or in your emails. The links to the other webinars I gave. Can you?
Yeah, the other webinars will be up soon. We are currently adding a webinar section to our AIGA website.
Yeah. Sorry, we were talking today and realized we hadn't done that for the last one. So, I lost it.
How much time per week would you say that people should be spending on researching and kind of combing through these lists and things like that in order to be successful with it?
So the reality is, if you're not busy, you should spend every free moment that you have. If you're not at full capacity working, then every free moment you have, you should be selling, right? But generally speaking, minimally, if you're busy enough, but you'd like some more work, you need to be spending minimally about five hours a week on this. And I have a whole schedule I go over with clients around typically it's Mondays is planning and emails. Tuesday afternoons are the best time to call prospects, especially colder ones. I don't really believe in cold prospects because if they're ideal in your, if you are uniquely qualified for them, you're not really cold. You just have to position yourself correctly and to get their attention. But and then ideally you have some connection to them other than that. But the ideal times to call. Mondays is planning, Tuesday afternoons, they've gotten into their week, anytime Wednesday, Thursday mornings, and then if you need to call on Fridays, call Friday mornings, but Fridays aren't really the best time to do, thank you, Rest Call. Fridays aren't really the best time to do sales calls just because people are trying to get their week done, especially as we head into summer. A lot of people do half days on Fridays and they'll just want to be out of the office by noon. They're just trying to get everything they have to get done, or out of the home office these days. So what I'd love to see is an hour of planning on Mondays and Fridays, or emailing on Mondays, and then scheduling those calls that you're requesting people to call you back at certain times on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays. And it's not that you have to do it all day. It's just you can use any time during the day on Wednesday. And the goal is to try to give, as you go through somebody not responding, that you give them different times of the day and different days of the week as options. And so you're noting about them that the first call you offered is a Tuesday at 10 a.m. and the next call you offer is a Wednesday at 9 or at I don't know, noon, and then but you sort of move, and Thursday then you're doing at 3 o'clock, right? And so you're sort of moving around in case to try to figure out when their best times of the days to be responsive are. And I don't know if John's still on the call, but one of the really cool things that happened with John was we were doing this process, and the other thing is you don't leave messages on the first couple of phone calls. So you'll call a couple of times and not leave a message, and then you'll leave a message, and then you'll email again, and then you'll start the process over, or try to find some other way to connect with them. And so you're kind of mixing it up, but you don't leave a message on the first call because if you leave a message on the first call, now it's awkward to call back. But if you didn't leave a message on the first call or two, then you call back, it's like they've seen your number before and they're maybe more likely to answer. And then, so that was, so John had this, John's back on and he can verify this, but John had this experience where he was doing that and he called and didn't leave a message, but had in his email given the option of scheduling a call with him later. And he texted me, he's like, this is one of my "you're right" messages, that the guy, as soon as he called, the guy didn't answer his phone, but he went on to the scheduler and scheduled the call for later that week. And so John ended up on a sales call with him, even though he didn't answer his telephone call. And we have to assume that when they don't answer our call, that has nothing to do with us. If you assume it has anything to do with you, you'll make the mistake of not calling back and taking it personal when it's not. So, Jeff asked about tips of building connections through LinkedIn. I like lots of great questions here, Jeff. I'm not a big fan of cold. Like, how are you in terms of, do you mind getting cold, random connections through LinkedIn? I think the only way that LinkedIn works is if it is specific enough that you are, asking, sorry, there's questions coming in and I got distracted, sorry. That whatever you send to them is personalized and specific enough that it doesn't feel like you just spam them, because you can tell those when you get those on LinkedIn that somebody just somehow paid for some access to something where they could spam you a generic message. And I don't even pay attention to those. I don't respond to them. I don't believe more connections is better. I'm a real believer in quality. For a long time, you couldn't even be my friend on Facebook if you'd never seen me cry. Like, you had to have that level of personal connection with me. And so people have different levels of interactions, and you have to look at their LinkedIn and see how they're interacting to gauge the best approach to them so that you don't put them off by trying to reach out to them in a way that um, isn't really suitable for them. But sometimes the only way you can connect with someone is on LinkedIn. And the Hood Sisters talk about connecting with people through DMs on Twitter as being one of the most effective ways to connect with people if people are active on Twitter, right? If they're not active on Twitter, it doesn't matter. But if you've got somebody that's their primary social media platform, then that's probably going to be the best way to communicate with them, because the DM function of Twitter is something people expect you to access if you're connected to them as a way to communicate. And I think LinkedIn's a little bit that way, but again, there's so much spam on LinkedIn right now with people reaching out that sometimes I think it puts people off a little bit. Realistic quarterly goals, they really depend on your yearly goals. So, so the way I like to break down goals is take whatever you want to make for the year and divide it by 10. And that's the number of ideal projects that you need. And so if you want to make 100K, you need 10K projects and you need 10 of them. And if you need 10 projects, a sort of average conversion rate on sales is that it'll take 10 sales will take 40 sales meetings, which will take 160 sales conversations, which will take 640 total leads you need to create for, like, in terms of your pipeline of people you need to know about in the universe. So it gives you sort of, if you factor it just sort of a 25%, just 4 timesing each of those numbers, then you can generally get to sort of where your goals are. I don't know what the mission and mindset question is. So Jeff, if you want to clarify that for me, I will attempt to answer that. The giving help to others, finding help from others piece of it, I think you have to gauge that. It's the same thing with the collaboration. I really encourage all my clients I'm going to go to the project. Most of the stuff I do is around the project work that I do with my clients. Is the ideal sell is where you try to do the work on your own. The upsell is where you bring in collaborators. And so some of my people that I know have a network of collaborators. I sometimes place other contractors with them when they have overflow and those kinds of things. But those need to be larger projects that can support you still making money on top of somebody else doing the work. And so making sure that that you are you're choosing your collaborators, I guess, and your referral partners carefully, because if somebody's referring work to you, how good their network is and how solid they are in their ability to sell is going to impact the quality of that lead coming to you. And so someone that undervalues themselves is typically going to refer somebody to you that's going to undervalue you. And then you want to make sure whatever referrals you're doing are reciprocal. I don't, within LinkedIn particularly, I'm not crazy about that referral piece of their functioning, in that I think it's awkward to ask somebody for a LinkedIn referral on LinkedIn. Now I'll make referrals for people sometimes where I private message somebody and say, hey, can I introduce you to this person? And then I'll introduce them in Messenger on LinkedIn so that they can start the conversation and then move it off channel without me. And that's a good way to use the LinkedIn platform to share referrals. If you come across something and you don't want to do the work, but you know somebody that would really love to have it, then that's a way to do that. Or if and ideal for me, and one of the reasons I want to do this group with 12 people is ideal for me is that if you know your niche really well, what you say no to is going to be as important as what you say yes to, because And so then in doing that, you'll offload a lot more work than you would have otherwise, because you know that if you take on that work that really should be a no, it's just going to get in the way of you taking on the work that you really want to do. And so the benefit of doing this work in a group, and it's happened in other groups that I've run, is people start referring leads, and they do it from a very informed place because you're clear about what you're looking for, they're clear about what you're looking for, and it makes it really easy to share leads and pass work up and down depending on what's available. And so, and then I have one more question that I missed, and I'm so sorry, Renee. Any thoughts about how this process is different during current times? So the worst belief you can have right now is that there's no work out there. A lot of my clients are busier or as busy as they've ever been. Some busier because clients were taking stuff off the shelf that they've been the client hasn't had time to do. There was a little lull for some around, and sometimes just even for my designers around execution, because of the whole homeschooling thing and the fact that some people were just trying to figure out life with kids at home and working from home and all of that stuff. So it was a little bumpy, but I think we're in a place now, and certainly in Georgia now that we're open, where people are starting to actually go back into the office. You know, in an economic, Katie mentioned that I started my business in 2001. I literally hung my shingle in August of 2001. And the market was already heading into a recession, and then 9/11 happened. And I went from being a recruiter at that point to being a sales consultant, because every design agency that I knew and talked to about recruiting was like, I don't need anybody unless you know a salesperson. And I was like, I can be a salesperson. As a recruiter, we'd been trained pretty extensively in sales. And I realized that I knew a lot more than most of my my designers around this around sales process, and that very few of them had prospect lists and any kind of vision of who their ideal people were going to be. And I ended up working with some of the biggest design agencies, or best known design agencies in Atlanta right out of the gate. So that, and at the time I was doing cold calls for them. I would go sit on site with them one day a week, and I would build their list and confer with them and make sales calls, and then go with them into meetings and those kinds of things. And I've shifted the process to one that is more of empowering you to do that work, primarily because I believe it's more effective. And that what would happen when I went into those meetings was there would be this awkward handoff, because the principal that I was taking into the meeting, I hadn't trained him on how to sell. He was just doing, and he or she would go in with a dog and pony of their work that wasn't an effective sales conversation. So Sam's actually, what is my take on requesting professional portfolio review from a design professional? In terms of getting feedback on a portfolio, I'll talk about that in just a second. Let me finish this thought. I was thinking that was linked to this, but the primary idea is that when you go into a sales conversation, you should be having business problem conversations, not dog and pony. Here's my work. Isn't it great? Don't you want to hire me? You're not in a power position from the dog and pony. Don't you want to hire me? You're in a power position when you've asked them really thoughtful questions about their business, and they've begun to realize that you are somebody who understands their business, understands what they're up against, and can take them to places that they can't even yet imagine going, rather than just someone who does really beautiful work and could make their work beautiful. So back to the question about the portfolio review. Yes, Sam, I don't know what level you're at in terms of growth, but definitely in the early stages of your career. We're doing a portfolio review for students and recent grads on Saturday. Yeah, thank you. I'm like brain fart on Saturday. And then, oh, great, Sam. So yes, so absolutely, as a student or a recent grad, the best time in the world to go to a professional, and I call them informational interviews, and they're actually the exact same thing as the sales conversation for a professional. Like, really, this stuff scales across your whole career, in that asking business questions about why the designers you're talking with it's not really a portfolio review in that you're asking them for tons of feedback on your work, but you're asking them about their path and their career and trying to figure out how they got to where they're going, and then getting a few critical pieces. But it's not like taking 10 pieces of your work in and spreading it out and going, okay, critique me. I think that is probably one of the most detrimental habits we get into as design students. That one completely undermines confidence, because everybody's going to have a different opinion, and it's really hard. Like, you can take it in, but ultimately you have to filter it for yourself and do what you think is right for the audience that you want to serve, because at the end of the day, what you do isn't as important as is what you do relevant to the person that's going to pay you money to do it. And so getting random opinions about your work will just confuse you. Getting very specific opinions from people who are doing the work you want to be doing, both about your work and about who you as a person need to become and what you need to learn and what you need to know in order to do that kind of work long term, is really the more important conversation. And then within the sales conversations, it's the exact same idea from the standpoint of when you're in a conversation, when you're in a sales meeting with a client, that meeting is entirely about them. And if they want to know about you, they will ask you something specific about you. But if you make that entire meeting about them and you learning more about them and you being able to just interject your experience with clients that are similar to them and give them ideas that help them, then there's no dog and pony to be had. The best sales meetings are the ones where you can walk out and they didn't even ask to see your work, because the reality of it is that your work's on your portfolio typically, unless you're like one of my clients who's still working with a placeholder and making multiple six figures. But most of the time your work's up on your website, and they're able just to go see your work, and they've already seen your work before you come in, but you're just talking about specific case studies of things that they like. So we're at 12:55, probably time for one more question. If I missed yours, highlight it, because some flew past me really fast, so ask it again. Sam, if you're not in the portfolio review for Saturday, if you would like to email me at education@atlanta.aiga.org. We don't have a wait list for students right now, so I can put you on that wait list in case somebody backs out at the last minute, and we can get you in. So anything else? Katie,
I think that's all the questions.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for being here, and yeah, I hope it was helpful. And if I'm going to go back really quick just in case anybody's interested. I'd really love to have you in this group. I'm doing some calls and bugging some people today to try to finish filling it up, but it's 12 spots. I've got 2 filled. That's it. If you're interested in that, then just email me at sb@sherrabell.com, and would love to have a conversation with you.
Yep, and I've put both the education and your personal email address in the chat box for anyone that needs them.
Thank you. And if you were reviewing for us on Saturday, I thank you in advance, and I'll see you on Tuesday night. All right.
Thank you, Sherra.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.